Namo Phat, good morning. Thanks for joining me for our daily practice check-in. Listen, listen, listen. This beautiful sound calls us back to our true home. The third mindfulness training. Aware of the suffering caused by sexual misconduct, I vow to cultivate responsibility and learn ways to protect the safety and integrity of individuals, couples, families, and society. I'm determined not to engage in sexual relations without love and a long-term commitment. To preserve the happiness of myself and others, I'm determined to respect my commitments and the commitments of others. I will do everything in my power to protect children from sexual abuse and to prevent couples and families from being broken by sexual misconduct. For our Dharma lesson today, we're reading Sensory Experience Leading to Nibbana by Ajahn Amaro from his book Catastrophe, Apostrophe. Dependent origination is only one way of describing the process, the development of an experience. It represents the process of experience affected by ignorance, when the mind is not awake and not seeing clearly. However, there's also the possibility of experiencing things through a fully awake mind. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses, the Buddha gives a description of the process of experience which is free from ignorance. It begins with interest. All things are rooted in interest. With interest, chanda, as the root, then all things are born of attention, manasikara. Then there is contact, phassa. There is the paying of attention. This is paying attention to the present. The mind turns toward that sense contact, and from that contact, feeling, vedana, arises. That feeling can be pleasant, painful, or neutral. The Buddha uses the phrase diverging into feelings or converging on feelings, vedana samasarana. You can use the image of a tree to picture this process. Interest is at the root. Attention is where the roots come together and the trunk arises from the ground. Contact, phassa, is like the trunk. When the branches spread out, that is the spreading of feelings, diverging into feelings. Then, significantly, in contrast to dependent origination, instead of feeling leading to craving and clinging and so on, in this case, the mind has a very different relationship to feeling. You can envision the next three steps in the sequence as the big branches turning into smaller branches and then into twigs. The next three links are headed by concentration, samadhi, then dominated by mindfulness, sati, and surmounted by wisdom, panya. Concentration, mindfulness, and wisdom. Concentration focuses the attention. Mindfulness brings awareness of how the feeling is changing and the context of the feeling. And wisdom recognizes that the nature of all feelings is anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanent, unsatisfactory, impersonal. The mind is fully awake and aware. All varieties of feeling are attended to, and the mind is in tune with them. The mind is not drawn into grasping the pleasant or opposing the painful. The mind sees feelings in their true light and holds them in an environment of mindfulness and wisdom. The mind is attuned to their nature. All things yield deliverance as their essence. You can imagine the fruit that grows on our beautiful tree. It is covered in the fruits of deliverance, vimutti, liberation. Every feeling that has been known and understood, whether pleasant or unpleasant or neutral, bears the fruit of liberation. The next link is merging in the deathless, amata goda. All things merge in the deathless. Following the image of our beautiful tree, the tree covered in the fruits of liberation, then merging in the deathless is represented by all of the branches and twigs and leaves and fruit being surrounded by and merged with the atmosphere, the air. Finally, all things terminate in Nibbana. The Buddha described all of this in order to help us to develop a skillful way of recognizing our experience and seeing how things work in the light of wisdom. What is the process of experiencing when the mind is awake? This guidance is a way of informing our meditation, informing our practice. When we use words like merging in the deathless, there is an easy way to understand that. We recognize that what we took to be a thing was only given solidity by our attitude. We gave it reality by the way we attended to it. Merging in the deathless is recognizing that that apparent solidity, the perception of thingness, was imparted to the flow of experience by mistaken attitude. There was no absolute thing that was born, and there is no thing that dies. Ajahn Chah put it this way: all the things of this world are merely conventions of our own creation. Having established them, we get lost in them, giving rise to all kinds of trouble and confusion. So if we take a principle like merging in the deathless, it is really just seeing the empty nature of things. It is simply seeing the dependent and conditioned nature of all things. Ajahn Chah also said that we determine things into existence. The last link is terminating in Nibbana. Reflecting on the image of the tree, if the air represents the deathless, we can wonder, what is the symbol of Nibbana? Then it came to mind that since Nibbana has no form at all, perhaps the terminating in Nibbana is a peace-filled awareness of this mind knowing the image. This is where it terminates, in this very heart. This, where the image arises and passes away, where these words and forms are being contemplated. If that ending is clearly seen, if the empty nature of all things is clearly seen, the result of that seeing is great peacefulness. And that is the primary nature of Nibbana, peace. We can be staying in a place that looks like paradise, such as Provence in the spring, or a tropical garden in Chiang Mai, surrounded by beautiful countryside and noble friends. Probably all of us have noticed at certain times that even when surrounded by wholesome, beautiful, noble, and inspiring things, the mind still can create suffering. When we look at the cycle of dependent origination, we see that things can end painfully, or with a skillful attitude, they can end very beautifully. Ajahn Sumedho summed this up in a very clear way. If you start with ignorance, you end up with dukkha. If you start with awareness, you end with Nibbana. Or even more briefly, ignorance complicates everything. That's the simple version. The work and practice of Dhamma is then to arouse and sustain the quality of awakened awareness. The more the heart is able to sustain this quality of awakened awareness and wisdom, the more the heart can be completely in tune with the reality of the present experience. This attunement conditions the realization of Nibbana, peacefulness. We bring attention to and sustain it on the present reality. This is the work that we all need to do if we wish to free the heart and realize peacefulness. 1. Rooted in interest are all things. 2. Born of attention are all things. 3. Arising from contact are all things. 4. Diverging into, converging onto, feelings are all things. 5. Headed by concentration are all things. 6. Dominated by mindfulness are all things. 7. Surmounted by wisdom are all things. 8. Yielding deliverance as their essence are all things. 9. Merging in the deathless are all things. 10. Terminating in Nibbana are all things. May all beings be well. May all beings be happy. May all beings be peaceful. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thanks for joining me today.